Hello, hi, thanks for joining us. My name is Gabriel and I am the winemaker at Scenic Valley Farms. The wonderful folks at Bill's Wine Cellar reached out to us recently and said that you guys were going to do a tasting of some of our wines, and since we can't be there in person, we figured we would do it in the box. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do, and then I'll tell you a little bit about these wines that we're going to be tasting. So we are Scenic Valley Farms. We are a farm in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and we grow all sorts of things. We grow pears, we grow hazelnuts, we grow hops, we grow green beans, elephant garlic, wheat. I could go on, but I don't know that much about all that stuff because I'm just the winemaker. But we also grow wine grapes, and we grow some really delicious wine grapes, and hopefully you'll enjoy tasting them today. We also make wine out of these wonderful wine grapes. And our goal when we are making these wines is we want to make wines that are first and foremost delicious. That's the single most important thing. We want you to enjoy tasting them. If it's a really interesting, cool wine with a cool story, but it doesn't taste good, then what's the point? Number two is we want them to be interesting. We want them to have a taste of place. We want you to taste this wine and say, oh, this must be from the Willamette Valley. It could be from nowhere else. And number three, and this is a really important thing to us also, is we want these wines to be affordable. We want them to be wines that our friends can drink, that you can go to the store and you can buy and you don't have to wait for a special occasion. We do make a small amount of special occasion wine, but really we want to make wines that you can drink and you can enjoy, which is why all three of the wines that we are pouring today are sort of in that $20 range. It's not by accident. It is very intentional. As my mentor Russ Rainey used to say, we want to make the wines that our friends are going to drink. So let's get you started. And the first wine you will be tasting is our 2019 Pinot Gris from the Willamette Valley. We have two vineyards where we grow Pinot Gris. One is right here on the farm where we grow in sort of deeper alluvial soils, and one is out in South Salem where we grow it on the famous red clay Jory soils of the Willamette Valley. We ferment this wine three different ways. So the first thing we do is we do whole cluster press, the way we do a white wine. We also ferment it on its skins, the way you would ferment a red wine. And finally, we do carbonic maceration, which is the way we do most of our rosé. Then we blend all three of those together. The goal is to make a wine that has sort of takes from all of those and has complexity and it has depth. We age this wine for 6 months in Oregon oak barrels as well to give it a little more structure, to give it a little more texture, and to give it a sense of place, as well as varietal character, right? So we want to extract all the different ways in which Pinot Gris can express itself. We want to really make this wine taste like Oregon, so we have the two major soil types of Oregon as well as the Oregon oak. And like I always say, we want to make it delicious. So it is a little pink, it's a little fruity, it has that great sort of peachy flesh that you get from a nice Pinot Gris. It has that wonderful richness and softness that you look for in Pinot Gris. A little more color than we've done in Pinot Gris in the past. And it's a direction we're starting to move this wine to just give it a little more character. So that is our Pinot Gris. As far as food pairings go, I like to suggest Italian food with this wine because Italian food can be sort of a whole wide range of different flavors and textures. As this wine can also sort of adapt and pair up with all of those flavors. It can hold up to a lot of really strong flavors without overwhelming any of them. So next time you've got a bottle of red or a bottle of white, it all depends upon your appetite. Have this at your Italian restaurant. Next up is our Ramato of Pinot Gris. You guys are really lucky to have this wine in your store because we're completely sold out of it here at the winery. We only make 4 barrels of this wine every year. It is our sort of our hipster indie rock wine. So with this wine, I really leaned into sort of the natural winemaking style. As a winemaker, I'm always really fascinated by natural winemaking, this idea that you just basically take these grapes, throw them in a box, squeeze them, and it's wine, and you don't do anything else to it. I know there's in the wine industry, natural winemaking and natural wines in general have taken on a whole nother connotation, and there's a very strong feelings on opposite ends. I don't even know how I feel about that personally, but what I do know is as a winemaker, I really love the challenge of making a wine that is no intervention to it. And since it's not something we do exclusively, but something we do sort of as a small production feature, it really allows me to go all the way into the deep end of the natural wine swimming pool with this one. So this is all estate fruit, fermented on its skins, wild fermented with this vineyard yeasts. We leave it on skins for about a week before we press it off. We do not add any sulfur, no sulfites added to this wine. We age it not only in Oregon oak, but we actually have barrels from a tree that went down on our property. You see me pointing about 2 miles that way is where the tree came down. So we use our own trees from our own vineyards to make this wine. We use our own wild yeast to make this wine. No sulfites, it's unfiltered. We racked it a couple times to try and get it as clean as possible. Even though it's a natural unfiltered wine, I didn't want you drinking something chunky. So I personally pushed a lot of my boundaries as a winemaker. We pushed a lot of boundaries as to how wine is made. But remember, as much as I dive into this deep end of the natural wine swimming pool, our #1 goal is to make this wine taste delicious. So it still has like really great, intense, rich fruit flavors, almost to like the level of like cherry as opposed to the peach you would get from our regular Pinot Gris. The Oregon oak is really present. You can tell it's there. Yeah, and what I want to do is I want a wine with a taste of place. And I also want a wine, so like there's terroir, but I also want a wine that has zeitgeist, if that makes sense. I want a wine that is of its time. And I think right now what's going on in Oregon is you have a lot of people making these small production natural wines in a way that, you know, this wine in Oregon did not exist 10 years ago, and now half the wineries in Oregon, they're making an orange Pinot Gris. So I wanted to make this wine a wine of its time as well as a wine of its place. It really blurs the lines between red wine and white wine, which I love. We have a handful of wines where we try and make it fit somewhere between red and white without just being like a basic thing. I would suggest serving this wine at room temperature. You don't really need to chill it. I mean, I suppose a slight chill is fine, but it's not necessarily meant to be cold, especially because of the oak. And because it is sort of a richer texture and it has a little more oak to it, it can stand up to like a hearty meat or like an intense cheese dish. Something with big flavor is sort of the food pairing you're going with this wine, because it'll hold up to it. It's a Pinot Gris, but it's a wine that has some muscle to it. Like I said, we're completely sold out of this at the winery, so whatever you guys have there at Mr. Bill's Wine Shop is what's left. But we've always got something fun and new coming down the pike, so if this tasting goes well, and if you guys like the stuff we're doing, I'm sure next time around we'll have some other kooky wine that we are experimenting with. That is our motto. And last, but certainly not least, is our Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. As Adriana likes to say, Adriana is the person filming us. Thank you, Adriana. Adriana likes to say that this wine is a true representation of the Willamette Valley. So a lot of this fruit comes from our estate Pinot Noir vineyards in South Salem. It's a high elevation vineyard with sort of red clay, jory soils, very shallow soils. So it becomes very late ripening. We end up with wines that have sort of lower alcohols, higher acid. It is sort of a style that we like, but it's also, it's the only way we could make this wine because that's the fruit we get. However, we do blend this with fruit from some other vineyards to try and round it out and make it softer and give it more of a fleshy texture, as well as to give you sort of a true representation of what the Willamette Valley Pinot Noir will taste like. And so this is sort of earthy and sort of bright red cherry fruit. It is processed in small lots. So the way we harvest our fruit is we have a 6-man vineyard crew. It is Guillermo, Juvencio, Adon, and Martin, Sergio, and Brian, who is our vineyard manager. Those guys will go out and they'll pick out, one guy can pick 1 ton a day, so we'll get about 5 tons in a big day. And then the next day those guys will come and they'll help you process it, so we'll process 5 tons a day. That allows us to make it in really small lots and really have control over it. As a winemaker, as you can hopefully tell by the previous 2 wines, I'm not necessarily married to one style, so I do a combination of wild yeast and commercial yeasts. I do a combination of French oak and Oregon oak. Some of the barrels that need filtration are filtered, the rest of this wine goes in unfiltered. So we're really doing all sorts of things to give you a really wide range of flavors, to give you a wine that is intense and complex and has depth and is interesting and is most of all delicious, as well as being affordable. I talked to the folks at Mr. Bill's and they said this wine is available right now for $19, which is cheaper than we have it in the tasting room. So you guys are getting a great deal on this wine. But I can tell you, I've worked at the wineries that are making wines that cost double the price. And not only do I think we're not doing anything differently, I think our wine's better than those wines that cost double the price. I'm really proud of this wine. I think when you have it, you are going to taste a true Willamette Valley Pinot Noir. I think you'll be really happy with it. As far as food pairings go for this wine, since this is an Oregon Pinot Noir, a Willamette Valley Pinot Noir, I suggest the foods of the Pacific Northwest as being a perfect pairing for this. So salmon, wild chanterelle mushrooms, some kale. We love our kale out here. Share this wine with your friends, with your loved one. Have it on Thanksgiving. Open a second bottle. You're not going to be disappointed. This is a really beautiful bottle of wine. So those are the wines we have for you today. I want to say thank you to you guys for trying our wines and for listening to me ramble on about them for the past 10 minutes. I want to thank the folks at Mr. Bill's Wine Cellar for giving us an opportunity to share our wines with you folks out there. Hopefully by this time next year, we'll be able to get on a bird and fly out there and shake your hands. In the meantime, thank you again, and I hope we can do this again soon. Cheers.